Welcome to Immigreats, the podcast that highlights stories of immigrants making great contributions in their adopted countries. My name is Munatsi and I'm your host. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe and now live in Texas, USA with my family. Before getting into today's episode, I'm excited to share a word from our sponsors, our friends at Alma Law in Dallas, Texas. Alma Law is one of the United States' top immigration law firms. They're a great resource for immigrants that are already in the United States and for people looking for professional assistance to move to the United States. I can confirm that the process of moving to the United States can seem daunting, and so you need really good help on your side. Alma Law specializes in handling all manner of immigration cases, from J-1 physician visas, investor and entrepreneur visas, family immigration issues, temporary employment, special petitions, permanent resident adjustments, and all types of employer compliance. You can call them today in the U.S. on 972-573-8575, or you can email them at help@alma-law.com to schedule a consultation. Visit their website too at alma-law.com for more information. I'm really excited today to introduce somebody that we found while doing some research and looking for immigrants with amazing stories to interview. Her name is Nse Ufot, and I hope I said that okay, but you can correct me. As I was doing research, has a really cool story. I'm somebody who's got quite a bit of interest in kind of politics and democracy and so on, and she's done some really cool work that has had a real direct impact on the political landscape in the United States, more specifically in the state of Georgia, and just the democratic process there. And so, welcome to Immigreats. Thank you so much for saying yes to doing this interview.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Munatsi. Happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. Let's get into it. I'd love to hear you just start by telling us your story. I know you were not born in the United States, so can you tell us more about where you were born and kind of what growing up was like and what led you to, emigrating to the United States?
Yeah, so I was born in Nigeria. My family is Nigerian. Yeah. I'm Ibibio, and so I'm from a place called, my people are from Akwa Ibom State, and it's in the South. I tell people I'm a Southerner twice because I'm from the southern part of Nigeria, and because I'm also equal parts Southwest Atlanta in all of the best possible ways. And so, yeah, I would say that my parents were a part of the sort of post-independence brain drain that many countries in Africa, but across the globe, have seen. So after Nigeria got its independence in 1960, there was, because of the divestment in Nigerian institutions, in indigenous institutions like universities, what happened post-independence was that a lot of, Nigeria and other countries' best and brightest were educated in Europe and in the United States, in the West, essentially. And so my parents were also a part of that generation. My father first came to study civil engineering, of course, right? A useful discipline, if you will, to build a new Nigeria. And so studied civil engineering at Georgia Tech, coincidentally enough, my alma mater. And did well in school, graduated, and I think flirted with the idea of coming back to build the new Nigeria, and then probably got two-pieced in the face by the reality of what that actually meant. Right. In that time, he also started a family with a beautiful girl from also the southern part of Nigeria. But my mom's family is particularly distinct. Well, my mom's story is particularly distinct because my mom was on the radio as she was in media and comms in Nigeria, but also from a really large and prominent family.
Okay.
I think one of the great distinct things that, and not family lore, but sort of family history, documented history, is that my grandfather brought the Lutheran Church to Nigeria, for good or for ill.
Oh, right.
That's also debatable. I'm kidding, Mommy. But yeah, so I say that to say that, I think that there was a world where they could have built a life and raised their family in Nigeria with her, a successful career in media and communications, and my dad building buildings and bridges and roads and tunnels and things that would be useful for the new society. But then war, man. it's trash. And ineffective government, unaccountable leaders. And so, I think my parents made the decision to come back. Atlanta was all right. College was great. The weather was, similar. Let's do that again. But this time he came back with a family. That included me, yours truly. And so my siblings and I immigrated with our family when I was in elementary school. And I moved to Southwest Atlanta. Eventually became an Atlanta public school graduated from Georgia Tech. Unlike my father, though, I studied applied psychology and human and computer interaction. So I've been in the artificial intelligence and particularly the application of it, my entire adult life, because of my area of study in undergraduate. And it's wild because it used to get dismissed as merely science fiction. And it is now like in the realm of, we need to make actual public policy for this ASAP. So happy to be here and happy to be of service. I think the way I describe the work that I do is, thinking about how we leverage technology, but also just analysis, data, facts, receipts, as the kids say, to build government and build society and build institutions that actually work for people. But I care with a great emphasis for me, immigrants, women, femme, children, poor people, and the folks who live at the margins of many of our societies. So, hi.
Thank you. Great introduction. I appreciate that for sure. After Georgia Tech, I believe you went to law school, right?
I did. I went to law school in Ohio, and that was fun.
Very different from Atlanta, I imagine.
Yeah. Okay, shout out to Ohio. I think I grew then, right? Like personally and professionally. I think that, being in your very early 20s, I graduated from law school when I was 23 years old. And so just being outside with money, you would think that that would bring you sort of joy and satisfaction. But I was particularly challenged by the culture shift for me. But I was also doing work. It was in Ohio that I decided that being a lawyer in the ways in which I had come to understand my role was not how I wanted to spend my career. And it was not how I wanted to make big change. So Ohio, I have a lot of critiques about the weather because why? However, it is also where I think I sort of stepped into sort of a full understanding of the kind of work that I wanted to do going forward. But I started as, I worked in corporate law, I worked in energy law, I worked in, and then eventually worked my way over to labor and employment, and worked with a number of labor unions in the Midwest, like negotiating collective bargaining agreements between municipalities, universities, and other large employers and their employee unions. And I was very good at it.
That's cool. Wow. That's cool. So I'm curious, I know you eventually, moved to the new Georgia project. And so how did you make that transition from that kind of work to, the new Georgia project?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was living and working in Canada, in the capital, in Ottawa, and I was working for the Canadian Association of University Teachers. And a very good friend of mine and her wife had come to visit, and we were riding bicycles through downtown Ottawa, and I was talking to them about my work and what I was doing, and she asked me if I had heard of an elected official named Stacey Abrams. And I was like, I had not. And she was like, well, are you coming home for the holidays? And I was like, you've met my mother. You know I'm coming home for the holidays. That's not even She was like, well, when you come home for Christmas, you two should meet and get together. And because I'm an idiot, I was like, I'm coming home to do hood rat things with my friends from high school. Like, I don't want to have a meeting with an elected official.
Okay.
But I absolutely wanted to, meet her. We ended up having brunch on New Year's Day.
Okay.
It was amazing. She laid out the clearest, most brilliant vision for a large scale voter registration, like civic engagement effort in Georgia. At the time, there were about 1.2 million Black, Latino, AAPI, and unmarried white women voters or Georgians who were eligible to vote but unregistered.
Okay.
And you think like 1.2 million people were eligible to vote but unregistered, just people of color and unmarried white women. Why is that meaningful? Well, it becomes meaningful when you look at Georgia's election performance over time. So at the time, sort of conservatives, Republicans were winning statewide elections. So that's top of the ticket, right? President of the United States senator, all manners of congressional races also.
Right.
But the statewide races, they were winning by an average of about 250,000 votes.
Okay.
So you look and you say, wait, Republicans have won the past 10 years by a margin of 250,000 votes. And you mean to tell me that there are 1.2 million people of color and unmarried white women who aren't even registered? So we don't know how they would vote. We don't know what they care about, but we do know that they need to participate in the process.
Right.
And the rest, as they say, is history. By the time I moved on after during the 2022 midterms, we had registered about 700,000 Black voters and people of color and young people and unmarried white women to vote in the state of Georgia. And it has had long-lasting and what we think will be generational effects on American democracy, but also just government and our lives, right?
Yeah.
We were in the middle of a pandemic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we've done some really cool things. I think that it's not voter registration, but yeah.
You really have. I remember vividly after the last election, even the presidential election, and how Georgia just kind of came into focus because being able to win and carry Georgia, essentially, got to a point where that was going to decide who was going to be in the White House, if I remember correctly. So I'd imagine that a lot of the work you guys did had a direct impact in that presidential election, in a real way. And even some of the stuff that we're still seeing today, with the elected officials that are now, that have been, charged and, just all this, crazy stuff that's happened in Georgia, that a lot of it, I think, the work you guys did has impacted that, right?
Absolutely. I think that, far too often people rely on conventional political wisdom. So, there are things that say that like the South, these are red states, like red states go to Republicans.
Yes.
Or that Black people don't vote, or that young people are unreliable, or that Latinos are not citizens, or that Asian Americans are secret Republicans, or that, white women lie to polls because they're just going to vote like their fathers and their husbands. Right. While there may be some reason for people to think about that, even if that is an accurate description of the way things are, which I reject, right? It doesn't mean that that's how they have to be, right? That when we think about building the world that we want to live in, right, that there are people who, if we understand the levers of power, if we understand the systems of government, if we understand what a governor does, what a lieutenant governor does, what a district attorney does, right? People have such clear ideas of the things that they can't stand to see continue.
Right.
They also have ideas about the things that they want to see happen. People are always like, there ought to be a law for X, Y, Z, et cetera. So there are ways that we can make that our reality, right? And participating in elections is not the only way, and it's not the entire way, but it's a key and critical part of building the city, the county, the country that we want to live in.
100%. That makes sense. I'm curious, why does politics, the political landscape, and just civic rights, why do those things matter to you? Civil rights and civic responsibility. Why do those matter?
Yeah, because left to their own devices, like unchecked capitalism and the hoarding of capital and resources will kill us all. It will kill our earth and it will kill us all. I used to feel weird about saying that out loud, but what I realized is that there is no earth two. Right? Like, quite frankly, I'm not going to get invited on whatever weird rocket ship Musk and to like take us to Mars, right? And even if I were to get an invitation, what about my family? What about the community? What about the people that I love, right? And so, how about we try to like, not destroy the one that we have right now, right? And so when I think about the actual forces that are polluting our environment, that create the conditions for extreme poverty, that create the conditions for disease, that profit off of healthcare, like providing healthcare is a for-profit idea is wild to me. Profiting off of making medication, right, etc. That if we don't have ways for citizens, for the body politic to insert our priorities into those processes, then our needs and the needs for our communities will never be prioritized. They'll never be met. Not when shareholder interest is the only thing that drives decision making. And so we need to have levers and ways to participate in public life that says how we're going to educate our children, but also the future labor force, right? How we're going to share the resources that exist on Earth. We need to make sure that there's humanity in that process. There's community in that process, always, in all of the ways.
Okay.
And politics and democracy are the best ways in which I've identified in this moment to make sure that we inject our voices into those processes.
Yeah. Okay. That's a very, very thought-provoking answer. I appreciate you saying that. I know, just as you were talking, one thing, that I point out often, just, living here in the U.S. and raising a family here, when you talk about the healthcare situation, it still just blows my mind how, so my dad passed away in 2016 and he was diabetic. And for the last kind of, 5 years or more of his life, he was on, had to be on insulin. And it blows my mind that, my dad in Zimbabwe at a time when, just like you talked about earlier on, after independence and just, lots of, divestment, disinvestment, and just the economy, shrinking and things like that, things not going really well, was still able to buy his monthly supply of insulin for the equivalent of like $10 a month. And then to get the exact same insulin here in the United States, somebody who's paying out of pocket would, I think I've been told like $1,000 a month or something ridiculous like that. And so, there are things that I've noted, that don't make sense to me, things that I think could be done better. And I agree with you that I think a lot of that stuff has to be done through policy, and policy laws are set through, set by, through elected officials and the executive branch. And so if people don't participate in those processes, then, their thoughts and their voices, are not heard. So.
Absolutely. So one, I'm really sorry to hear about the passing of your father, and thank you for sharing that with us. And it's really interesting that you bring that up to make this point. So insulin prices were crazy, right? And especially in light of the fact that, people needed to live. The creators of it, the inventors of it, intended it to be free, that it was, thousands of dollars a month for some patients. And with the election of Joe Biden and also with the election of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, which gave in 2020 and 2021, which gave Democrats the governing trifecta over the federal government. They passed a law that capped the price of insulin at $35 a month in the US. So today, as we talk, insulin cannot be more than $35 a month in America.
I actually
Right.
didn't know that.
And that is directly
Yeah.
because of people voting in the 2020 elections, presidential election, and the 2021 runoff.
Okay. Wow. That's cool. That's direct impact right there. I actually, I think I'd read something about there being a bill about, to cap the price of insulin, but I just never followed, I guess because, my dad passed away. And so I don't know anyone now that needs insulin. And so I wasn't really paying attention, but that's really good to know. So
as we speak, insulin prices in the United States are capped at $35.
no, that's really good to know. Thanks for sharing that. That makes me feel good about the process when it's followed and it works well. So
well, that's what I mean. Left unchecked, the people who made insulin were like, we need profits. Sorry. Like, get that blood sugar under control, but we need that cashier, right? That is what drove policy. That is what drove pricing policy until the people were able to inject influence, right, with one of the largest purchasers of it, which is our federal government.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really good to know. Tell me, so again, when I wear my lens of a kid who grew up in Zimbabwe, and I imagine you could relate to this. Participating in the political process in certain parts of the world, even in my country where I come from, is not always safe, especially if you are going against the status quo. If you are not a proponent of a ruling party or a proponent of a dictatorship or something like that. Just curious, what's been your experience as somebody that's been really participating in the political space in the United States, in a state where for many years maybe the Republican Party was controlling the state and had the levers of power, and you were working and essentially doing a lot of work to try to influence the process and allow politicians to be checked, as you put it. How was that? Did that ever make you feel like you were putting yourself in harm's way? Did you ever feel like your safety was at risk or anything like that? If you don't mind me asking, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing you should know is that for all of the progress that is made, here in these United States and in other parts of the world, there is oftentimes like a corresponding backlash by conservatives, by the enemies of progress, by the defenders of the status quo. I've seen it time and time again, like throughout the course of history, but also just in my own life and in my work. Number one. Number two, white Christian nationalism is a hell of a drug. And so when I tell you that, with the changing demographics that we see in America, as people continue to immigrate and as we move closer and closer to America no longer being a majority white nation, there are people who are responding very violently and very aggressively to that fact. And we've been talking about this for quite some time. And I think that as we get closer and closer to 2050, which is the sort of date that demographers have predicted that America will no longer be a majority white country, we see the pushback, the backlash, the white lash, if you will, also be super violent and aggressive and get more and more like charged. So people have been trying to delegitimize electoral results since Black people and brown people have been participating in those elections. As a matter of fact, people will try to delegitimize electoral results that they don't like all the time. That's not a race thing at all. That's a power thing, right? But pulling up to the United States Capitol with a murder plot to kill the Vice President of the United States, to kill the Speaker of the House, so that you can interfere with the counting of the Electoral College votes because the disgraced former president of the United States told you that he won the election without any proof that he won the election.
Yeah.
Bringing bags of feces and throwing it on 100-year-old paintings.
Yeah.
Killing people because you don't like the outcome of an election. It was predictable. It was anticipated. Having members of Congress do tours, security tours, so that you could see points of ingress and egress and where to get in and out and where cameras were right, is an entirely different kind of escalation, right? And it is violent. And people who do this work do it at great risk. There was Moss and her mother, Ruby. They were two Fulton County election workers. These are like civil servants. Like, listen, I come here to count votes and do my job and then go home. And I do it every year, right? Who were harassed by Trump's lawyers, harassed by Kanye West lawyers, right-wing conspiracy theorists, death threats. Like, it's insane. So yes, this work is dangerous. It continues to be so. And that is because power will defend itself, right? And listen, the only thing that we have is people power. The only thing that we have is sort of our ability to sort of hold the line, take care of each other, and create the conditions and create demands for the world and the country that we want to live in. That is true in Senegal, right? That's true in South Africa in 30 days, right? Where they're going to their presidential election. It's true in Mexico. Their election is on June 2nd. It's true the EU parliamentary elections are going to happen June 7th, right? That what we are seeing is, a fight for the future, and a fight for who gets to set policy. And some people are not happy when immigrants and girls and Black people and queer folks participate in the process. And those people are going to have to get over it.
When you talk about the kind of insurrection, the January 6th, insurrection, a couple of weeks ago, I got to interview on this podcast a gentleman named Aquilino Gonell, who actually was part of the U.S. Capitol Police Force and was actually at work on duty on January 6th. And I mean, the stories he had to tell, and I mean, he's detailed a lot of stuff in his book, but, it's absolutely, in my opinion, the darkest kind of moment in U.S. history, at least in my participation in U.S. history and living in the U.S. And in many ways, I mean, in my head, I always thought that, there's certain things that just can't happen in the United States. And so kind of turning on the TV and watching that stuff happening live and learning that, Mike Pence and, all the people that were in there, literally were afraid for their lives, just it blew my mind.
But you elected a broke rapist.
So. Yeah, that's a whole conversation right there, and it looks like right now there's a chance that he may be back in power, in a few months' time. So it's crazy. It's crazy.
Listen, not if I have anything to do with it.
Okay, so you're still doing some work now. So I know you're not with the New Georgia Project anymore. So are you continuing still, with your civic engagement processes and just encouraging get out the vote campaigns?
Absolutely. They say we who believe in freedom shall not rest. And I really do believe in people. I really do believe in people power. I really do believe that we have the ability to save our lives. I get excited about, proving that over and over and over again. If it's at the school board where, at the school board level where, parents are, actively participating in, electing school board officials who care and understand about high quality education, and not just real estate developers and realtors who care about property taxes and keeping them low, right? That, there are people who believe that censorship and banning books doesn't change history. These things happened, right? That feels meaty and juicy and important, even though it's not super sexy and it's not defeating Donald Trump for a second time, right? That those are the things those are the building blocks of our society, and small d democracy and getting to practice it over and over and over again is what I really enjoy.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Oh, thank you. This is you've said a lot of very meaty stuff. Stuff that I know I'll be thinking about, and all our listeners will be thinking about because I 100% agree with you in that whether you're in the United States or anywhere else in the world, participating and taking your democratic rights seriously and participating in the process. We don't all. We're not all going to see eye to eye on stuff and on what's important, but I think we all need to weigh in on the process and actively engage and in the process decide who you're going to vote for by doing your research and understanding where people stand on critical issues to you, and then making sure that you're your vote signifies, the things that matter to you. So I agree with you 100%.
Can I just not? I promise I will. This is your show. You will have the last word, but I cannot. So yes, it is about rights. Absolutely. And the right to vote and the right to use your voice in the process. But it's also about real stuff, like the material conditions that make up our lives. The minimum wage in Georgia is $5.15. The minimum wage in the United States is $7.25. There are some states with no minimum wage, right? Like that actually affects how people feed themselves and how they will grow and how healthy they'll be and whether or not they have money in order to like buy medicine and do all of these things. So like yes, it is, exercising our rights and using our voices, but it's also about fuel subsidies in Nigeria, right? That it's also about what do you mean New Zealand and Australia are running out of fresh water, right? Like it is real, and like having leaders and figuring our stuff out together feels very, very important. And because I think my research is continuing to show me that like people like rights and democracy are losing the like meaningful part because of the ways in which enemies of progress, conservatives, white Christian nationalists bastardize the language and say things that they don't actually mean. So I just wanted to say, yes, it is about our rights, but it's about like whether or not we live and die and the thing and how and what kind of life we'll live while we're here.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm glad you stepped in on that, because I think you're right. Ultimately, real life issues are being determined by, who we all select to represent us in office, and we're choosing by whether we participate or not. You're kind of choosing in some capacity. And so we've got to take it seriously. So no, I agree with that 100% and appreciate you correcting me or adding to what I did.
Adding to it. It's a conversation.
Yeah, it is. Yes. I promised you that I wouldn't keep you for too long. So as we start to wrap up, just curious if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to find you? I know you are active on social media, but what are the best platforms for people to find you?
Am I?
Well, we found you on social media, so
yeah, So my website, nseufot.com. So NSEUFOT.com. It's always a good way to reach me. But I'm on Instagram as the Nse Ufot. I'm on TikTok as just Nse Ufot and SEUFOT. So yeah, TikTok might not be around for much longer. So follow me over there.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can have this conversation.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. And I also know that you wrote a book. Can you just tell us about your book and how do people get their hands on the book if they want to?
So I'm actually in the process of writing a book. I signed a book deal.
I see. Okay.
I signed a book deal and I'm super excited about it. And so, there will be more details about it. You're going to be sick of me talking about it. But follow me on Instagram or TikTok for updates and going through the process. It's a graphic novel.
Okay. And do you know when it's set to be published?
2025. Early 2025, first quarter.
Okay. No, well, wish you all the best with that, and I'll be looking out for it. So.
Thank you.
That's cool. Yeah. So thank you, Nse. This has been really, really insightful. I've enjoyed this conversation. And if you don't mind, I may keep in touch even, after, beyond this podcast, just because I think there's a lot we could learn from you and just be able to, support you as well in, with your book and everything you're doing. So thank you for joining us.
I would love that.
That's cool. So that's the story of Nse Ufot, an immigrant who's made a great impact here in the United States, but also in the world at large. Please like this podcast and follow us on your favorite podcast player to catch new episodes as they drop. You can find